Hey, it's Joe, and this is my next project.
I was right in the middle of building a car and I had an idea. Why don't I start another project? And I had race cars on the mind, and time to time I'd hung out at the racetrack, pavement, some dirt, and said, how about we build a street dirt car? And at a dirt track, these cars, they beat and bang all year long, and especially the Camaros. At the end of the year, they beat the front end up so much there's not any fenders left. It's just a hood. And they kind of look like open wheel cars. So I thought I would start there. So I got a Camaro model, a little scale model, and I carved the front fenders off of it. Well, let me show you. Look at this. That's the first model I cut. And I cut the sides like that. And then when I looked at it, it was just too long with the top on it. So I had to cut the top off of it. And once I cut the top off of it, I could shorten it. That's where the idea came from. I got some solder and I made some Roadster headers. Yeah, that's where it came from. This particular one, you can see, I never did that on the real one, but I think you could cut the back off. I think you could put aluminum plate that was a spoiler on it. Windshield's kind of broke off. This thing's old. And anyway, you're sitting in the back seat driving it. That's how much I shortened it up. Got to have the fat tires sticking out. This is a wide body car, and if you don't stick the tires out, your scale stands the chance of being off some. Anyway, that's what I did. And look, while I was doing it, even came in a supercar version. This one I never made. That's a 2000 Camaro, cut off underneath the bottom door hinge to where the door glass still fits, the door port fits, the windshield fits. Put a wide body on there, this wide body, with a transverse V8 served under glass. Anyway, I think we're getting off topic. So now all I have to do is get the real car and see if I can make the real car look like that car. So I went and found a Camaro, and you know, I've spent about 2 lifetimes in the auto salvage business. And at the time, I had several Camaros, but I didn't have one complete enough, so I had to go out and hunt down a Camaro. And I found this yellow Camaro, and I didn't have videotape back then, but I was taking some pictures. And I didn't get a picture before I cut the top off, but I started cutting on it as soon as I got it. And here is that Camaro. And I already cut the top off, and I got it all measured out, and the plan was I'm going to cut 27 inches out of that floorboard. Also, at this picture, I thought the windshield would have been too high, so I just clipped it through the windshield. I was planning on running Lexan and cutting the top off the windshield. We'll see how that works out. So, get the tape measure out. This is my son and I's project. There he is. And it's his high school car, his high school project, and we're going to go on a road trip. We're going on the power tour, hot rod power tour with it. So we've cut it in 2 pieces, and we've cut 27 inches out of the floorboard. And this is what that chunk looks like. You can just fold it up and walk off with it. And then when you pull the 2 pieces together, like in the model that you saw earlier, you can sit in the back seat and drive it. And these cars, the rocker panel here is pretty parallel, so when you pull it back together, they meet up, just as planned. And you can weld it across the floorboard. Right across the floorboard, We put in some X bracing in the door. We're going to weld the doors on this thing. It's going to be like a modern version of a 23T is kind of what I had in mind. Because, you know, the 23T is a pretty old car. Everything you buy on a 23T nowadays is just aftermarket. Nothing was ever a 23T. It's a fiberglass body and a factory-made frame or a homemade frame. Really? Where are we getting these parts these days? So the Camaros were plentiful, and I thought, if you can figure out how to do this with a regular car, maybe you can save somebody some money. So there we are. X-brace. I left a little bit of the fender on there, and for some reason I thought it needed these giant Mickey Thompsons. And you didn't see the last picture. You can see it on this one. I welded the windshield top back on it. And then I cut the door down, and it's going to be welded back on it. Just stick with me. Just hang in there. Everything's going to be okay. I put a 3/4 piece of conduit in the top of the windshield. That's easy enough. And made some A-pillars, and then this little swoopy side here. Plan was to have a flat dash, which I did. You'll see later on. I love this roll bar, this 4-inch roll bar. I'll tell you about that. I could go to the scrapyard, and I was seeing these 4-inch bins, these stainless 4-inch bins about that long, just laying around. Who's bending this stuff? And so I talked to the guy at the scrapyard, and he turned me on to a place that they make pickup steps. And they were bending this 4-inch stuff, and then they mash a foothold into it. So I went there and I begged them. They didn't want to do it because it's kind of an assembly line thing. But bring me this, let me buy this piece of roll bar, this stainless, before you crimp it. Don't mash it. And they didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But anyway, they did. They sold me 2 of them. And that's one of them. In fact, you can see in this picture, this is just one of the pieces that they mashed. And later on, I got a better one. Yeah, later on, I got a better one. So here we are. That's in the old shop. And we're going. Hot Rod Magazine does this power tour where they go across the United States. I don't know if they still do it, but they used to do it, and it was great fun. Looked like everybody and their brother bring out any kind of hot rod you got, new, old, whatever you had. Come have fun and drive it across the country. They didn't have a lot of rat rods back then. What they had back then were really nice rods, and billet and nice paint jobs. Cars were really expensive back then, and then they had some people that didn't get much notice, which were unfinished rods, which I guess basically that's what started the rat rod phenomenon. Here it is with the hood on it. And I'm cutting all this off. The plan is I'm going to cut all this off, and I'm going to make a plug, and I'm going to make a fiberglass mold, and I'm going to spray this front end, and I'll have a front end, and I'll be able to make more. So we did. We made the plug. Here's the plug. That is a lot of plaster of Paris, some stock parts, some metal. I think I covered it in chicken wire at one point, or some kind of wire. And I got blankets at the Goodwill store, and I cut them into 1-foot squares, dipped them in plaster of Paris, and put them on the wire. And then sanded it down. And I tell you what, if you ever do this, that plaster never gets dry. It's just wet, wet, wet. Takes forever to get it dry. I don't know if there's another way to do it, but watch out, because that plaster does not like to dry. Not as quick as you want it. All right, and about that time, I don't know how I got in touch with Jerry Wiesner at Custom Rodder, but I sent him some photographs, And damn if he didn't do a little article on it. And I don't have as good of pictures as he had. And let's look at his article, and you can see how this plug was made. There's the article in Custom Rodder. It was just kind of a one-page thing. But he wrote a great article about cutting modern cars into hot rods. And he shows the car and making the plug, measuring device that you can move from side to side. You have to kind of put a cutoff point around the windshield there. That's what that is, where you can stop spraying the fiberglass with the chopper gun. Here's the man that I hired to come over, and he sprayed it with a chopper gun. I think his name was Mike. Great guy. I really appreciate him come do this. He had a lot of knowledge that I certainly didn't have. There's the plug when it was done. And there's one of the pieces that came out of it. Jerry Wiesner was nice enough to do an article on this. What a guy. And I've read his articles for years. Amazing. Anyway, and after we got the mold made, a friend of mine, Max Barrup, and I made an instructional video on how to build this car. And Max was great help the whole time. He's just trying to make me laugh on the video. And he's the kind of guy that knows enough that when he sees you doing something wrong, he'll give you one warning, but only one warning. And then he's going to sit back and watch you cut your finger off. So we got the mold done, and I found a place in Shreveport, Louisiana, actually Keithville, that would produce a product out of my mold. And I hauled the mold over there, and this is the first part they produced. It was my first one-piece front. Looked like it came out of a vacuum form. Did you ever have a vacuum form when you was a kid? Cool little toy. Anyway, that was it. That's the way they came out. Here it is when we mounted it on the car. We cut out all the pieces. And we're trying to get ready to go to this power tour. And we're hustling because it's coming along pretty quick. You can see in the picture this intake that's too damn tall. And I had to cut a hole in the scoop to put the scoop through. I couldn't find another intake. Would you have found another intake? I did not like putting this intake on there, that big scoop. The rear end's already painted in that picture. And then we were just joining the fiberglass flip front to the rest of the body. And the rest of the body was just, it had the hell bondoed out of it. It was slick, but it all fit. It fit really well once we got it done. There you can see the X-braces in the door. You can see, I think that's a Cavalier steering wheel, and I just painted it red. I painted the horn button, I painted the leather, I painted the shaft, I painted everything with the same paint. And in this picture, I made a flat firewall. I moved the wiper motor. Wiper motor mounts on the dash. And I moved that under where the glove box was and redid the transmission, the windshield wiper transmission, all up in there. And it really fit. It's not that hard to do. If you move it correctly, it fit right in here. And you can see the frame, and I'm going to show you how the frame's done. The frame, if you look at these open wheel cars, the wheels are up by the front. I hope everybody understands that, and when you build your rat rod, the wheels go at the front, because sometimes people forget that, and it's very noticeable. So what happens is you have a front frame section like this, and the wheels are right beside the engine, and you got a whole lot of nose just sticking out there, and you don't know what's wrong. The wheels go to the front. Here's how we get there. If you take that Camaro frame, strip it all out, clean it up, and turn it upside down and set it on two 4x4. See the 4x4 under here? Frame's upside down. That's the upper A-frame mount. It will almost balance on this flat part. That's a Camaro frame. I don't know about other frames, but I've had a little experience with this one. And the tails sit on the 4x4 and the 2x4 like that. Is that clear? Okay, and you got it supported in two places. Now, the front frame horns, take a piece of angle iron and vice grip it to the frame horns. Now it's held up in 3 different points because we're fixing to saw this thing in half. If you put a straight edge to the back side of the lower A-frame mount and just let it fall down there, that's where you cut it. Right in front, right here. Just mark a line with your soapstone, both sides. And if you put a framing square up off your table, you can draw a line just outside that framing square, right up there with your soapstone. And it will make a line just about like that. And you cut it off with some kind of cutting device, whether it's a Sawzall or a disc wheel or a plasma cutter. It makes no difference. And then you pull that frame apart, however much you want. This car, we pulled it apart 19 inches. Is that showing? Just pulled it apart. Now this angle has not changed because the tails are held up in the back. This angle has not changed because the frame horns are held up in the front. We've just stretched it. And then on this particular car, this is a 4-inch, I'm sorry I don't have the number, but it's 4-inch by 5 or 4-inch by 6. Just measure your frame. But that piece is available and you cut it off 19 inches. You put some little fillers in there to where you can graft it on and weld that mother up. And then, here we go. We're getting ready to go. We got the frame under there. We got the firewall flat. We've used a lot of Bondo. Little epoxy primer. Can't see that one very well. Just anyway, black, yellow, that was the chosen color. I don't know if I'd choose that today, but that's what I chose then. Everything a different color. These are Speedway adjustable upper A-frames. I would recommend those. Stock upper A-frames suck so bad. They're just so ugly, unless you're not going to see them. But these were Speedway and they were very adjustable. You could set the caster and camber with the heim joints and not with shims or anything. That's what I would do, apparently. All right. That's my son Curtis and me. We're test driving this car. That's probably the first time we sat in it together. He was still in high school, and he's a good student. He's a good man. And we took it out, and we had a little bit of an interior made. Wasn't very complicated, but it was kind of wrap around here. You remember the old T-birds that wrapped around from the door panel to the back seat? We used the stock Camaro back seat, but I kind of had to make it where it wrapped around a little bit, and it wasn't exactly like a T-bird, but it was pretty good. And then the door panels had pockets in there with little doors that opened, and you know, you could keep stuff in there, which is cool. I like the wheels sticking out here. Here's what happens. In my opinion, when people make when they make open wheel cars out of fat cars, the problem, in my opinion, happens right here, right behind the front wheel. And if you look, you'll see. If you cover up the back, they've got a good car. If you cover up the front, it's a pretty good car. This transition is hard to do, and I don't know if I did it correctly, but that's the way I chose to do it. And I don't think I ended up using these wider tires. I can't tell which ones they are. At first, I had some really wide tires, too wide, and these chrome reverses were really offset to the outside too. I wanted to bring the scale of the car out because that makes the car look narrower. All right, back in the shop. This is my friend Brandon Long, and Brandon is a painter, just a very artistic painter, and I'm so glad that he helped on this. He's putting the final skim coat on all the body, and he showed up with a rack of all his candy paints. We had one day to paint it. I said, we're leaving tomorrow. He's going to paint it. We're going to put it together that night. We're leaving in the morning. So we made a paint booth right quick. And we had a fan blowing out that back door, and we painted that thing. I like to say we painted it. Brandon Long painted it and did a heck of a job, and I never could have painted it like that, but here's what he did. This was just shocking. He said he could paint flames. I knew he could because I'd seen his work, but I've never seen it up close how you paint flames or how he painted flames. And I wanted a black car with flames with lipstick red interior. Okay, so first thing he does, paints the whole car blue. Who would have thought that? You painters out there probably know that. I didn't know that. He painted it blue, and he pinstriped all the flames. And then he paints some candy white. He paints some candy yellow and orange, and he just really knew what he was doing. It was great to watch him. He's such a talented guy. Candy white, oh, it was just beautiful. And here we are finishing up. There's Brandon. What a good job. The flames turned out great. And here it was finished. We're at home. We backed up in there. It's not backed up in there for effect. We're loading it up. We're leaving the next day. The intake was too tall. I really didn't want the intake sticking out, but that's what I got. So I had to do it because we were leaving. And I wish you would have joined these two yellows together, which we'll get to later. Had a digital dash. There's part of the interior you can see, kind of down the doors and the pockets. Had a low car shifter. This is just a Cavalier steering column. And this dash it's a piece of plywood that sticks past the dash, and it has pipe insulation on the end, and it's wrapped in vinyl. Wrapped and glued is all that is. And then this piece of red oak here that I sanded and cut out, and I put this dark black Plex behind it. And then I think there's some kind of Chrysler digital. Digital was new back then, and it was cool. So I got some kind of digital dash out of something. And speedometer never did work right. But I remember pulling it up on the wrecker one time and watched the speedometer. The speedometer was reading 45 miles an hour while the winch was pulling it up there. That's how much it didn't work. But it looked good in the parking lot when you'd turn it on and it would light up. And there's the roll bar. Anyway, a lot of fun. Just padded over the package tray. This car was so much fun to build, and it didn't take that long. What fun. And the part, we didn't do anything to the back of this car. I think you could have cut it off and just put a plate on there, maybe curved this way, and then made the spoiler out of that and shortened the back end of that car up. Probably would have helped. And we took off the next day. This is the road goes on forever shot into Texas. This is West Texas, and went fun. Senior trip. We went on this power tour, Hot Rod Power Tour, Hot Rod Magazine, and they did get us a picture in the magazine. And after this little show here, one of the top cars that year was Troy Trepagne's Sniper. And man, when they left that show, him and a guy got in that car and left that show. Curtis and I jumped in our car and we chased them down and we followed them. And we ran to the next town. It must have been 120 miles an hour. We were excited, and I wasn't sure that car would run that fast or whether it was explode or not, but I didn't care. Pedal to the metal. And what happened at the end of that, we pulled over. Just as soon as they pulled over, and the guy riding in the passenger side of this car got out, and he was the editor of Street Machine magazine out of Australia, because they had been talking about cutting some of their cars into hot rods. They didn't have a whole lot of hot rods over there, apparently, and they liked what I was doing. Well, he said, we want to take pictures of your car. So we went out, and he gave us a centerfold of the car, centerfold of the magazine. And it was so cold. I'm sorry we're wearing hats. I apologize for the scoop. Not sure if the paint shouldn't have been joined, but anyway, that was just the highlight of my son's senior trip. We had a blast. We went from Colorado to Kansas City, and they gave us this centerfold, and then they gave us another page in there, which was cool. They got some good shots of the car. And then they gave us another page. And that was just, see, that's what they wanted to do. They wanted people, that's their version of, cutting down one of their cars, and they kind of liked what we were doing. Anyway, we had fun. That was the highlight of the trip. Anyway, when we got back, I wanted to get rid of the scoop, and I wanted to join the paint. So I rattle canned this. I think I painted it with soap, let the soap dry, and I rattle canned over it where I could wash it off if I didn't like it. But I liked it. Yeah, that's another picture of it after it was painted. Brannon came back and he painted it, and it really looked good. We took it to a few other shows. We took it to Super Chevy in Dallas, and we got a picture in Super Chevy magazine. And we took it to Tulsa, and we got an award. We got Most Artistic Award at Daryl Starbird's show in Tulsa. And we set the car up there. Who comes over? Norm Grabowski. Grabbed me by the neck. Who's this guy grabbed me by the neck? That's one of the first guys that ever built a 23T, my friend. And this car was also there. Didn't you build a model of that when you were a kid? I think I did, or I knew somebody who did. There's a stagecoach. This was just so much fun. Anyway, it's a testament to how much fun you can have with a junk car and a Sawzall. And we're going to do this again. We'll have more fun. Stay tuned.
I hope you enjoyed watching as much as we enjoyed making it. If you did, tell your friends and subscribe. It's important.